Hey, hello, everybody. Welcome to True Crime Predators with your host, Cathy Cassidy. And today we have a really unique, interesting guest, Ken Good. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I am an attorney. I specialize in bail law. Let's see, I'm fixing to be 65 years old. I graduated from law school in 1989.
Okay.
I'm married. I have two kids. I've argued cases at the Supreme Court of Texas, the Court of Criminal Appeals, various courts of appeals, the federal courts of appeals. I
Okay.
like legal issues. So when all the bail reform issues came up years ago, I set about to become knowledgeable about that. And I've written articles across the United States on bail reform, criminal justice reform issues. I have my own
Okay.
podcast called The Bail Post, where that's what we talk about is the criminal justice issues.
Okay. That's very interesting. So I have never heard of a bail attorney. As I didn't know there was a specific subset of attorneys. Can you help us understand what does that mean? I mean, we know bail and we know attorney, but how do those things merge?
I represent bondsmen across the state of Texas. I
Oh,
represent insurance companies. So I appear at licensing hearings when there's an issue, at complaint hearings when there's an issue, and bond forfeitures when there's a failure to appear. I spend a lot of time on what's the proper result, how do we get that resolved, and then making sure that the correct judgments entered. I think on average, my office files about 45 documents a day. So we're very
oh,
busy.
wow. Yeah. So what does that mean that you represent the bail bondsman?
Well, I
Like,
mean,
what
if
does
they're
that
getting
look like?
licensed, so before a
Okay.
regulatory agency, they'll seek legal counsel. If they have an issue that's arisen that needs to be responded to, I'll be retained,
Okay.
or or I'll represent them in court proceedings.
Okay. And so so you represent the criminal side,
No, ma'am, just the bonding company. I
just
mean,
the
it's
bonding company.
I mean,
Okay.
it's considered a criminal case, but we don't think of it as a criminal case. I mean, we would think of
You
it as a civil proceeding, but in Texas, they're classified criminal.
Okay, because yeah, that's the only people needing bond, right?
Well, but I mean, the bond forfeiture is something that's declared in the criminal case because they failed to appear, but that
Okay.
initiates a new proceeding, which we call in Texas a bond forfeiture. And we think of it as a civil case in nature because follows all the civil deadlines. It enters a judgment for a financial amount, but it's still
Okay.
classified a criminal case in Texas.
Okay. How did you choose to get into that type of law? 'Cause that seems very unique. Is it unique? It seems unique.
Yes, it's very unique. There's few attorneys that do this, especially on a statewide basis. I would say so. I graduated in '89. I started working at a law firm. I was working on a trial team, doing medical malpractice defense, representing hospitals, doctors when they got sued. I was on court TV early on in the case. I
Oh,
argued
wow.
probably my first case at the Supreme Court of Texas as a 4-year attorney. So very blessed. Um, but somewhere in time, I was contacted by a bondsman that had a whole bunch of proceedings that needed help. He needed help with, and so
Okay.
I got involved and helped him get those resolved. And as a result, word of mouth, and so it just developed into a practice, and that's
Oh.
primarily what I do today.
Oh, wow. That is so interesting.
Yeah, I
Oh,
testify at the legislature on bail issues. I'm on the board of directors of the bail association. We propose bills to the legislature for them to consider. We support bills that are filed that are good for the criminal justice industry, and we point out issues uh, if we find bills that would be hurtful to the criminal justice system.
okay. So tell me, what would you like people to know about, like, you kind of when we started connecting, about mental health and bail and violence, and tell me what you want people to know.
Well, I would say what I would want people to know is that bail's been around for 200 years.
Oh,
Um, it's not, I mean, I don't think it's ever been popular, but the reason why it's been around that long is because it does one thing and it does it better than any other release mechanism, and that's get people to go to court. And,
okay.
you know, we measure release mechanisms by failure to appear rates. So the criminal cases are very unique. So once there's a failure to appear, the case has to be put on hold for
Okay.
most situations. We have to wait for them to come back. And so the higher the failure to appear rate on a release mechanism, the more backlogs are created. The private industry has the lowest failure to appear rate by far. It's
What
not
does
even
that
close.
mean, the
Okay,
private industry?
so let's see, out of 1,000 people,
Okay.
the private industry has a failure to appear rate of 10% or less. So out of 1,000 people, that'd be 100 people that would
Okay.
fail to show up for court. So their case has to be put on hold till they come back.
Okay.
But the other types of release have a 50% failure to appear rate, a
Oh, wow.
75% failure to appear rate, and you can compare, those numbers pretty quickly, 500 versus 750. And then if you're in a very large urban area where you have that many cases set every week or multiples of that adds up very quickly. And so the more backlogs you have, the more pressure there is to just dismiss cases. And when you
Oh, okay.
dismiss cases, criminals see that as a green light to commit more crime. So what we don't see is in the press is that when you have large failures to appear, you're going to have numbers, you're going to have backlogs, and then backlogs puts pressure on courts to dismiss cases, because otherwise the criminal justice system will collapse in our urban areas, because they're arresting large numbers of people on average every week. And if they don't show up, then the case puts on hold. And if with these soft on crime policies, the numbers that are failing to show up get higher and higher. And I think the
Okay.
other thing I would want people to appear is, when we release somebody pre-trial, it doesn't have anything to do with guilt or innocence. That's a presumption that applies at trial.
Okay.
When we're releasing them pre-trial, it's all about what assurances are you going to give the court that you're going to return to answer the charges. And if you can't give the court assurance, or if you break your promise multiple times to come, then the court has the right to hold you. What the problem we're seeing in this criminal justice reform, soft on crime policy, is they don't want to hold anybody. And it's creating problems. That's one of the reasons why we have more crime, is because you're not holding people, you're not holding them accountable. And then people are taking advantage of that. So, here's the best example I can think of. So like we passed Proposition 47 in California, which
Okay.
was we were going to change certain felonies to misdemeanors. And one of those was theft under $950. And
Okay.
then our DAs in our urban areas in California decided, well, we're just not going to prosecute that anymore. So shoplifting increased dramatically.
Yeah. There's
Organized,
no consequence whatsoever?
there wasn't for a period of time. So
Oh, wow.
organized crime, gangs, career criminals saw that as a green light to just commit shoplifting.
Well, yeah.
It got to the point where businesses were closing because they couldn't sustain $25,000 a day in shoplifting.
Yeah, that's
And
insane.
then we
When was
have
this? When did that happen?
that was probably in the last 10 years. And then just in November, they voted to roll back Proposition 47. But the problem is the legislature hasn't funded it. So we still have a lot of problems. But yeah, then the ultimate problem with that is, when businesses close, then commercial real estate values start going down.
Yeah, so it just becomes this whole domino
Yeah,
effect.
it becomes a domino, and then you've got commercial property selling for 30%, 50% of their value just 5 years before. And so you're starting to see those policies affect taxes in our inner cities. And so you're seeing the mayors start to set off the alarm. But the problem is are in our urban areas, these are policies, these soft on crime policies are being pushed by activists, and they have a tight grip on it. If you don't follow the policy, the company line, you're going to have an opponent.
So I have two questions. I have
Mhm.
to back step a little because so when someone is arrested, bear with the ignorance because I'm very yeah, I'm not super familiar at all. So when someone's arrested, they get what, an option to, what is that called? Like a peace bond?
Well, it
Is that
depends
the
on where
one where
you
you
live.
sign? Okay.
Depends on where you live, but in Texas we have three types of release. So
Okay.
you can be released on a private surety bond, or which, like, if you post, if the magistrate sets your bail at $10,000, they can go to a bondsman, pay a premium, probably $1,000, and they'll
Okay.
post the bond form and they'll get released. Or the
Okay.
second option is they can file a cash bond, which
Okay.
would mean they would put up the entire $10,000 with the court. And then the
Why would
third one,
someone do that? Why would someone not use the $1,000 over paying the full amount?
well, because if you pay $1,000, you're not going to get it back because it's premium, just like insurance policy. I mean, we're
Okay.
insuring we're guaranteeing your appearance. If you pay the cash, the whole amount, and you do all your appearances, you do everything you're supposed to do, then you would get 95% of it back from the court.
Okay.
And then the third type of release is, we call it a personal bond, but it's called different things in different states. You just referenced a peace bond, but we call it simple release. You're just
Okay.
being released on your promise. In
Okay.
Texas, it would be a $10,000 personal bond, but it's just a bond without surety. So you're making a promise that you will appear and you'll pay
Okay.
$10,000 if you don't, but they never they never enforce those because individuals couldn't afford to pay that.
Okay. Now, what makes someone eligible for each of those? Is everybody, I mean, we all kind of know
Well, in
everybody is not
Texas,
eligible for bail.
the job of the magistrate is just to set bail. So it sets the
Oh, okay.
amount, and then the defendant decides whether to post cash or surety. And then the trial court has the discretion in certain situations to grant them a personal bond. In Texas, there's a list of crimes, violent offenses, where they're not eligible for a personal bond, and so they would have to then choose between the remaining two.
So is everyone eligible for bail?
You look to the Texas Constitution, and the Texas Constitution has five now, different sections about bail. Initially, it just said everyone has the right to bail unless they're charged with a capital offense. We've
Okay.
added over time some other things, but we just made major change to our Constitution on bail in November that just went in effect in January,
Okay.
and we added certain violent offenses. We listed, I think, 9 violent offenses, or 8. We call it the Abbott 8 or 9 of Abbott 9 offenses. And so if you're charged with some violent crimes and the DA's office files a motion
Okay.
to have you held, then the trial court can conduct a hearing, and if certain evidentiary standards are met, then you can be held pretrial until your charges are resolved. I mean,
Okay.
that's probably a reaction to all these soft on crime policies.
Yeah. In Texas, you're known for being a little more strict with crime, which, yeah,
Well, we
everyone
are a law
always
and order
says, like, don't mess with Texas.
well, we are a law and order state, but we are having a feud between Harris County, which is Houston,
Okay.
and the legislature. Houston has not really followed what the legislature has set in the statutes. And
Oh,
so that's caused a little bit of a rift over who sets bail policy, the legislature or the commissioner's court in Houston, Texas,
okay.
or Harris County. And so I think that's getting resolved because that constitutional amendment was probably somewhat a result of that, and a couple of other urban areas. And
Hmm.
the first 2 cases that were reported where they were enforcing the new constitutional amendment came from Houston.
Okay. Very interesting. All right. And now, if we move towards like mental health and violence, and what are your thoughts on that piece and how that affects bail and families and
Well, the mental health issue is a very complex issue. Historically, I mean, before Reagan was president, we had a network of mental health facilities throughout the United States. The problem with that is, mental health doesn't have its own constituency, like uh, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or
Mhm.
people who oppose tax increases. And so anytime a county or a government agency need to save money, they would cut the budget for the mental health facilities. And so
Oh,
you have examples long before Reagan where mental health facilities were just, cesspools, because they didn't have enough funding. And you had examples from decades ago where people were either they didn't have the funding for drugs or even food.
are
And
you
so you
talking about like state-run
Mhm.
facilities?
And so
Okay.
you had some class action lawsuits filed across the country, and that's kind of what started the demise of our network of mental health facilities. So those kind of over the years closed. Reagan closed the federal facilities, and then over time, the state
Mm,
facilities lost funding. And so our jails became the largest
mhm.
mental health facilities in
Yeah.
the state, either the jails or the prisons. And so those people ended up being put in the criminal justice system. Now, with this criminal
Mm,
justice reform, this bail reform, we've gone through a period where we want to King's X. We want to get these people out of the criminal justice system. And so if we identify mental health issues, then we just dismiss their case. But the problem is, remember, we've gotten rid of the network of mental health facilities
right.
outside of the criminal justice system, and so it became a revolving door
Yeah.
to prison
There's
where
no
somebody,
result.
yeah, they get arrested, they get in jail, they get on their meds, they get
Mhm.
controllable, they get released from jail because they dismiss their
Back
criminal
again.
case, they get off their
Yeah.
meds, and then they get uncontrolled, and it's just a
Mhm.
revolving door. And so we're now kind of realizing that we can't just, with these reforms, just dismiss their case and then put them out on the street again without anything, because we look at the Irina girl from Ukraine that was killed in the
Mhm.
subway. His was a mental health issue. I
The
mean,
guy with 72 arrests? Is that who
yeah,
you're
they
talking about?
kept, they
Yeah.
kept. I mean, when he would commit a crime bad enough, they would keep him. So,
Yeah.
but
For a short time, right?
well,
Or
he
what, a
was even
couple
in
years?
prison for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But we
Not yeah.
can't just, so if they have a mental health issue, they have a mental health issue no matter what crime they commit. So if they commit
Mhm.
a low level crime and we say, well, it's not bad enough for us to hold them, well, we're just dismissing them. And so that's what
Right.
creates it. So they just get no treatment, they get worse. And so then they commit a really bad crime. And so now that's what's happened. They're now holding this gentleman because the crime he committed was murder. And, I mean, the the solution for mental health is so elusive at this point.
Mhm.
I say all the time, if we could find a solution to mental health currently, we could be billionaires, because it's a very difficult decision. We've set up an infrastructure to address it that's encased in the criminal justice system, and we're now in a period where we want to send those people outside the criminal justice system, but the criminal justice system is where the infrastructure is to treat them, and that's the cheapest
Mhm.
option for treating them. And
Really?
because any other option is very, very expensive. And
Um,
now we have courts trying to do other options, but the backlog on private beds or
mhm.
facilities outside the criminal justice system are just really, really long. And so there's not really a good solution yet.
No, I think, it's never dawned on me, I've work in forensics and traditional therapy, never dawned on me, and I feel a little embarrassed to say, like, why did the prisons become so overpopulated? And it never clicked in my head because the state-run facilities that were
Yeah, I mean, I don't
an
think people realize
absolute
how
horror
many
show.
people are in the criminal justice system have mental health issues.
Oh, yeah,
And
so many,
yeah, I
so
mean,
many.
or in drug issues, you take those two and, that's probably more than, I mean, that's a substantial number of the population.
That's why, with a lot of the high profile cases, and someone will say, well, he has autism or he has
Hmm.
schizophrenia. Well, I worked in the prisons and jails. Half the population has that. We
Yeah.
can't let it, but you can't let everybody go, because to me, as a clinician, no matter what you have, whether it's schizophrenia or you're just an antisocial personality disordered person, if you're not safe enough to be in society, that's really what it boils down to. Maybe it determines whether you go to a forensic state hospital or a standard, prison, right?
Yeah, well, this is great discussion because I have a question for you. Because with your background, one of the things that I've identified on this mental health issue, especially right now, where we're using it as a King's X to dismiss the criminal case.
What does that mean, King's X?
Okay, so we've identified you as a mental health issue. So this is a low level crime. So we're just going to dismiss the criminal case because we've identified you as having mental health issues. But
Wow.
but you as a mental health worker are knowledgeable about that. I mean, I've always been told y'all have been taught to be, you take what they tell you and you take it at face value. You don't triage it whether it's true or not.
Well, I'll tell you this. So I don't know what you know about my background, if anything. So I got my bachelor's in psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a master's degree in counseling psychology. So
Mm-hmm.
that's more of like traditional therapy, like what you're
Yeah.
describing. And we are fully taught whatever your client is telling you, obviously it's obvious, and it's not drilled, it's just part of it. Whatever they're saying, you believe them.
Yeah.
You're not like,
Yeah,
that is not your role.
but let's take that and apply that to the criminal justice system where we have career criminals, we have
Yes,
gangs, we
the
have, I mean,
manipulation.
where they come in and say, "Oh, I've got mental issues." Well,
Right.
I mean, for them to be evaluated, y'all are taught you support what they
You
say.
believe them.
You
Well,
believe
here's what
them.
happened to me. So I graduated with my master's in counseling psych. Straight out of graduation, I mean, I don't remember anymore because I'm so old now. Right after, it felt immediate. One of my classmates said, I'm working at the local county jail. I got a
Mhm.
job there. Do you want to work there? Because I know you work psych inpatient, and I think, you could handle this. I was like, yeah, I'll try it. I like the high acuity. I start working at the jail, and I'm like, I am going to get killed here
Yeah.
using this template application of education where we believe
Mhm.
everything. First thing the COs and any of the jail staff say, this was the running joke always, even the parole officers I worked with. How do you know an inmate is lying? Their lips are
Mhm.
moving.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what? Like, we're taught you believe
Yeah.
everything. So I went back and got a second master's in forensic psychology,
Yeah.
because I was going to I
Yeah.
felt like if I'm going to work with this population, everything I just learned, I mean, not all of it, but a lot of it does not apply to the criminal justice system. And
I
that's
agree
when
with that completely. And the
I
problem is
had to go learn
the
like
mental
what to do.
health, I mean, the mental health field is not prepared
No,
in,
no.
to be integrate or to be
Integrated. Yeah.
incorporated
Oh,
into the
yeah,
criminal
both.
justice system. And there's no
Yeah.
triage. There's no ability to triage.
You can get snowed
Mhm.
so easily if you have not. This is just my opinion, because after I got the degree in forensic psychology, I felt so much more prepared
Yeah.
and learned I mean, it is a completely different angle. It's a different interview. It's a different assessment.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
learn how to ask motivating forensic type questions. You don't say, like in regular therapy, you would say, do you use drugs? Well, you learn in forensic psychology, you never say that. You say,
Mhm.
how often do you use drugs?
Yes. Yes.
So you learn how to, because you have to now step up your brain to this. You're working with a lot of very manipulative people, not all of them, of course, but in prison, a lot of them are. In jail, not necessarily. So you're right. We are not, a regular standard clinical psychology does not touch forensic psychology.
Did you see the series? I think it was on Netflix called Adolescence. And
I
uh,
think so.
and the reason why I asked that is, I mean, it's won a lot of awards, and but I was wanting to know about accuracy. So they
Oh,
arrest like
wait,
a
was it a
13-year-old.
hospital?
Do they arrest a 13-year-old for murdering a girl? And so they do a lot of single shots, but it's not very many episodes. But the 13-year-old one, are very young male, won a lot of awards. But the articles I've read was talking about his portrayal of mental issues,
Mm.
was supposedly, or interview styles, and was supposedly portrayed very well. I would encourage you to watch that. And
Yeah,
I mean, I
well,
would love to know what you thought about the accuracy of the portrayal, because he goes from he didn't do it, and I mean, he's just a little kid, and then all the way
mhm.
through to at the end, he's calling his dad to tell him he's going to plead guilty because he did it.
Wow.
Hmm.
And so then you wonder, I would wonder, has this child been, who knows why he switched from this not
Well, they do a
guilty.
very good portrayal of it. I mean, and they
Yeah, that
have
would be
really
interesting.
strong evidence.
Do you
V
wanna know what my favorite thing to watch in the world is?
What?
Like 13-hour interrogations.
There's some other shows, and I don't know what network they're on, but that's what they are interrogations, and it's just,
I love
uh,
them.
I I don't remember where the first one I watched was, but I agree with you. They are very well done, and it
Yeah,
requires
because
some
you
great
watch.
acting.
Oh, no, the real ones,
Oh, okay.
documentary.
Well, there's some.
You go to YouTube and there's channels where
uh
they show the true interview,
Oh.
the interrogation, and watching someone who's been accused come in, deny it, and as
Mhm.
the detectives who are obviously very well trained in, the different maneuvers to get someone to tell the truth. Some of it obviously can be, there's always a small sliver of other things going on. But overall, watching that system of the interview, how they do it,
Mhm.
there's a literal like mental massage to get somebody to say what they've really done.
Well, it's interesting that, under our criminal laws, the test on whether somebody has a mental issue that disqualifies them from going forward on their case is very narrow. If they know the difference between right and wrong, even if they have mental issues, but they know the difference, they're
And it
still.
has to be at the very split
Mhm.
second they did the crime, not before, not after. No,
And it
one
will,
little
and then there's this, if they're afterwards, then we have to try to rehabilitate them so they can stand trial. And so,
yeah.
I mean, I was at the legislature talking about a case, and they were using an example of a case that had gotten lost in the system, they said, for many, many years, pretrial. And they were saying this guy was being held improperly pretrial. Well, it all turned out to be mental health issues. He was declared
Mhm.
incompetent, and all this time they were spending to rebuild him to competent so he could stand trial. So they thought he was competent at the time of the crime, but not afterwards. And so they spent all these years to try to get him to rebuild him, or whatever the proper terminology is.
Mhm.
And so it was just a complete misrepresentation of what was going on.
Wow. Yeah, it is. I think, because mental illness is can be subjective. One, it depends on who's diagnosing you, how well trained are they, and how efficient are they, and how, there's it's such a, like, that's the whole thing through all of my schooling is it's a very gray area.
Well,
And
and I would
using the
say a lot of
test.
mental health issues is an explanation of
Mhm.
why the crime was
Why?
committed, not an excuse. It's just an
Right.
explanation.
Right. And that's where I think it's getting very
Mhm.
dangerous. What are your thoughts on like civil commitment?
Well, first of all, I probably don't know enough about it, but in Texas, your ability to have a commitment is really limited to you can have somebody civilly committed for 72 hours if they're a danger to themselves or others, but if they're anything else, then you can't do an emergency. And I'm not really sure what the standard is for anything else. I mean, y-
So like there's a prison, well, in Illinois where I'm from, the way that with sex offenders, that's who I used to specialize in for a period of time. They would the sex offenders that they would go to, have their trial or take a plea, whatever, go serve their time in state prison.
Mm-hmm.
Then once their term was completed, they being the prison staff, the psychologists, psychiatrists, go through a battery of testing, determine if this inmate, sex offender, was safe enough to return to
Mm-hmm.
the streets, or
Mm-hmm.
if they would go on to a indefinite civil commitment.
Yes.
And then they go to a state hospital, but it's a prison, but it's
I would
also
have always thought that was unconstitutional, but the court said no because they served their time. I mean, how can you hold somebody after they serve their time? But the standard that has been used on that is public safety and whether they're a danger. And so I
But how do
understand
they
that.
determine who
Oh yeah,
who at the end of their prison sentence is even eligible for that?
it's a good point. It's a good point.
Because
But
I
I mean,
think there's like
how did you survive treating sex offenders? I mean,
it's so crazy because yeah, I can vividly remember in school, I was in a cohort, so we were all together the entire 2 years. And everybody, when our teacher would be like, you could work with sex offenders, we were all like, what? Like, we never even thought of that. Everybody was like, we're never working with sex offenders. And then that first job I got, the first sex offender, because I had worked psych inpatient with little kids, age 5 through adult, really even a little baby with geriatric, but not really, and watching the victims for 8 years coming in fresh off of sexual abuse, like smearing feces on the wall, bashing their heads into the wall, urinating on themselves, needing shots in their little behinds, and teenagers, and watching this for 8 years. Like, I will never forget the first sex offender. I had to go. There was a pod called the Special Needs Unit in the jail, and that's where I would have to go every day and do the suicide assessments, and then also check in on. Oh gosh, how would that work? Because I can't remember now how I ended up having to check in with the first guy, and I read his charges, and he was a child sex offender, and I just remember standing like in the hallway before I entered the pod, or I was in my office, which was right next to the pod, and just praying, like, dear Lord, please give me the strength to not literally murder this guy. Like, how am I going to sit across from him when he, to me, was representing all these little kids that I had seen, and I just was like this. It was really like flashes of the victims that I had worked with in the hospital.
I have nothing of that equivalent, but I never practiced divorce law. And one of the reasons why is because I always had nightmares. I would have nightmares that my wife was doing all the really bad things that attorneys were doing to each other, that she would do them to me. And
Yeah.
so when you're getting to sex offenders, I mean, that's times 1,000. I mean, I would have
It
nightmares.
is, but I'll tell you what happened is the first sex offender I worked with, it was like something took over my brain. And I'm not like a rigid religious person, but I am Catholic. Like, I love God, I pray. And when I went into that pod and I had the first sex offender, it was like something took over my head. And there was no personal bias. I felt like I had his brain on a platter, and now I could learn what are you doing? What did you go through? What are you things you're doing? And it helped me actually help the victims too. And you would be shocked. I don't know if you would be shocked to know it's not an excuse like you're saying, but it is an explanation how many of the sex offenders, mostly the pedophiles is who I'm talking about, were pretty brutally sexually abused as kids. And a lot of them didn't know that's what it was. They think, oh, my babysitter did it, so I was supposed to
Well,
be
I will tell
somebody
you, I mean, all of the things that have done are things that I have been so sheltered about. And
Yeah.
I at 64, fixing to be 65, I want to be sheltered from that. I mean,
Yeah.
I think of the whole idea of a pedophile. I'm like, I don't even know where you would go on the internet to find crap like that to look at, and
Oh, I know.
I'm not ever going to find out. And you get people like, oh well, they got child porn on their computer, and I'm like,
I know.
I mean, I never want to even know where in the dark
Mm-mm.
corners of the internet stuff like that resides.
And
And
that's okay. Yeah, it's definitely not if it's going to everything like what you're doing for your work, everybody's different and you don't know what you're built for until you start doing it. I mean, there are times that I've worked with, say eating disorders. That's not
Mhm.
for me. Like you have to just figure out what's for you. And somehow with these guys, with other inmates too, I find it helpful to the inmates I've worked with to help teach not necessarily the sex offenders, but them included, teach them to like learn and understand themselves and learn that there are other ways than violence. Now they're not going to take, one or two meetings with me and reform them.
Sure.
And exactly what you're saying, mental health inside of a jail and a prison or any correctional facility is so limited.
Well, and that's a good point about the amount of time it takes as well. I mean,
Yeah,
drug rehab, I mean, uh, it has a high failure rate. And
yeah,
so
for real.
you've got to be willing to go back and push them back. And so, that was my criticism, the whole Oregon debacle where they decriminalized all hard drugs, and then they started having record numbers of overdoses every month because they had all these treatments that nobody was opting for. And the reason why is you've got to have the hammer of the criminal justice system to
Mhm.
give the people an incentive to go back to rehab. And when
Isn't
they
that
fail,
sad?
to go back again. And when they fail, to go back again because it has a 75% failure rate, and so you
Wow.
have to keep them until they make the decision that they're going to change.
Mhm. In one day. So what does that mean when they decriminalize it? Does that mean it's just not a crime?
Yes, that's what they did. And now it was for a period of time, and it was such a fiasco that after the period of time, they did not renew it. And so, yeah,
Oh,
they
oh, I didn't know that.
decriminalized all hard drugs for a period of
That's
time.
insane.
Isn't that insane? I thought the
Why
same
did they
thing.
do that?
Soft
Do you
on
know?
crime, these activist groups pushing it, and there's like, oh yeah, when you decriminalize it, then it takes away the stigma and people will seek treatment. They set up all these treatments.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
people will not voluntarily go to treatment. You know that.
Yeah, they would have gone if they were gonna do
Yes,
that. They
if it was
wouldn't be where they
voluntary.
are.
And so they're
Right.
paying for all these programs that are offering treatments and 0.01% would opt to go. And so, and then drug use increased 6% during that time.
6?
And 6, but drug overdoses were setting a I mean, overdoses were setting a record every month. So what you're doing is, as law enforcement, you're just reviving them with Narcan and
Yeah.
then getting them ready for their next hit. It
Oh
just
my
doesn't make sense.
gosh. No. Yeah, I was gonna tell you this other thing, speaking of, like, when people when they get bail, when they don't get bail, and this is a little off center of that. But when I worked for the parole division, specifically with
Mhm,
sex offenders. So, and that was my first job out of my forensic psychology master's.
mhm.
And that my supervisor there was amazing. He taught me so much. But I remember, like, okay, they're on parole, and here's us, mental health, which is a little bit of a conflict because you're supposed to be able to tell us anything, and we can't tell anybody because of
Yeah.
confidentiality. But with forensic law psychology, that does not apply.
Mhm.
We tell
Yeah, you're there to
what
put
we
it
do.
together.
Yeah. So, and sometimes the parole officers were sitting in the groups with us. So, talk about like a total cloud over psychology. That's not normal,
Yeah, yeah.
But these guys, sometimes the sex offenders would admit to new crimes often, or we would catch them. You learn how to,
Mhm.
you start to feel like an interrogator. My role, we all were. It's like you're catching them, and it's this game of cat and mouse, and they have to tell everything they've done over the week or the weekend. And if we see anything, then we have to call parole and we have to tell them exactly what they admitted to, and then parole comes and we set up a polygraph. Sometimes they get arrested right there in the group. They're
Wow.
cuffed up in the group. And I remember one day I was new, and learning. I actually did my internship there, and then they hired me straight from there. One day the the supervisor of the parole division came down to the basement. We worked in a basement with no windows. It was very symbolic. It was like descending into hell. And he came down. He's like, I just have to meet you. I was an intern. And he's like, because you're going to get us all out of a job soon. And I was like, why? And he's like, because you're trying to send all these guys back. We don't have space in the jails. I was like, what do you, I never, you
Yeah.
never know anything until you're doing it.
Yeah.
So he explained to me that just because someone violated doesn't mean they're going back. It depends. How bad was Bob's crime compared to the other 10 guys' crimes? They have to take the worst one of the day, depending on how many beds are available in the jail that day.
Yeah.
And I was just devastated.
Yeah.
So it really, they might just walk.
You kind of reminded me of a situation that, I've mentioned on, other interviews about, I have a sister who had a car accident in 1989 and she broke every bone in her face.
Oh,
But she had a brain injury, but she also started a 30-year addiction to prescription drugs. I've said that story,
for
but
the
what
doctor's
I haven't ever talked about is she went to drug rehab a couple of times.
Okay.
And one of them, she just disappeared. And probably the first one. And what it was her husband at the time had taken her to drug rehab. And so I figured out where it was. And so I was calling all of her friends, and because they knew how close we were.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I'm traveling to this place to meet with her to find out what's going on, her friends are telling me, because they know how close we are, they'll tell me anything. Well, she has a boyfriend. Oh, they met in drug rehab.
Does she have a husband too?
That ended up being her subsequent husband after she divorced the first one.
Okay.
And I mean, it just became lie after lie after lie.
Yeah.
And I remember meeting with her, and her first husband, who I was very close to, I thought we were going to get into a fight because he thought I was there as an attorney to get her out.
Oh,
When I met him, I said, you need to get a divorce and you need to go for custody of the girls. And he
yeah.
was shocked, and and he couldn't do it because he was a wealthy businessman and his business was tied up with his parents and his brother, and so for him to do that, it would have taken him down and the rest of his family down. So he had to,
Wow.
and so it just became a complete tragedy.
Yeah.
And it was
I'm
a
so
tragedy for the
sorry.
next 30 years. So I mean,
And
these things, brain injuries,
yeah.
drug
And
issues, have
did
long-term
the
consequences.
opioid addiction start from the doctors prescribing for the pain? Yeah. Yeah. And
Yes.
I've seen it even with dental work. It's
Oh yeah.
crazy
Well, let's
how it
see.
started.
So 30 years later, her second husband died. I had her declared incompetent. I put her in an assisted living facility where we regulated her medications. She blossomed,
Okay.
but
Oh,
before
good.
she blossomed, she called me and wanted me to prove getting opiates because she took anti-seizure medications. I mean, she had always taken painkillers, opiates, and we had taken her off all of them. She didn't need them,
Oh,
but
wow.
she wanted them. And
Yeah.
so I said no, that I would never approve for her to get opiates without a better reason than just she wanted them. So she
Hmm.
proceeded to pull off all of her toenails.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's quite a
So
response. But
I
there's
went,
like the brain injury, the
yeah,
impulse control issues. Oh, that's
very much impulse controls. But how we handled it was I went and visited with her. I talked to her about what she did, but then I talked to the facility about, let's give Carla, my sister, a job. I mean, I know she's in this assisted living place, but do you have a job for her? And, they had a welcome committee for
okay.
new people. So they put her on the welcome committee. She blossomed. She forgot about
Oh,
drugs. She became the cruise director,
she needed
and
a purpose.
she had and so she had
Yeah.
a brain injury, but she was still really smart. And
Yeah.
that's why I like to say, with all this mental health issue, your best chance of success is still family involvement.
Yes, the support system.
Hmm.
And as you, I'm not sure if you're aware, you probably are, a lot of people who are incarcerated have have grown up in foster care as
Hmm.
kids, and they have nowhere to go, and then
Hmm.
they end up, some of them commit crimes so they have a place to go. They
Yeah.
won't actively admit that, but you can see the pattern. They have no family.
Well, and a lot of them have alienated their family. Like my sister alienated her entire family for years,
Yeah,
but at that when it was needed, I came back in, and so I would just hope that if you have families that in that situation, if you have an opportunity, you would
yes,
take the chance
definitely.
of stepping back in because that is your loved ones or even your former loved ones. Let's be real, that's
Yeah.
their best chance of success.
I agree. And, and that's a whole different, there's so many different populations, the addiction population, the serious,
Mhm.
violent crime population, the etiology of all of it, whereas, like your sister was from a severe injury. And I think with addiction, it's so hard on the families. It's
Mhm.
draining,
It
as you
really is.
know.
It
It's
really is.
it's on repeat. The
Oh yeah.
lies, the empty promises, the exhaustion, the stealing.
Gosh. I mean, just you saying the word lies just brings back so many memories and
Yeah.
so many cycles. I mean, in 1989, I was a brand new attorney. I wasn't even an attorney yet until a month after her car accident. And so,
Mhm.
I was poor. And, at the time, the poor man's rehab was jail. And so I tried to get her arrested so many different times. And she
Yeah.
had committed crimes, but they wouldn't take her because, of her brain injury and because of her issues. Um, but the point I want to make is because of these criminal justice reform, these bail reform, we're taking away the poor man's rehab because they will not hold these people. And if they have to just do simple release, they will do simple release. And that oftentimes puts these people in a worse position than they would have been if we had just held them 48 hours.
Why do you think they're not holding them? Is it because of space or
They're not holding them
funding?
because of this criminal justice reform, bail reform. If it's not a severe crime, they want to get them out as quickly as possible.
Because why?
Because that's what the activists are pushing for. I mean, we don't need to hold these people. They will come to court anyway. They all want to resolve their criminal case, and so we shouldn't be holding them. We shouldn't be making them post bail. No, the the pandemic proved all of that to be a lie.
Yeah, and then you see them just go right out. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. I have definitely seen it. They get out and they just go do something immediately.
Well, and Yolo County in California, the DA's office did a study, and in that study, he compared two low-level offenders,
Mhm.
one on a simple release, one on a private surety bond, and nonviolent offenses, and he found that the one released on simple release had a 200% greater chance to commit a new violent offense in the next 18 months. Now, if
Because
I'm a
there's no, like,
yeah,
investment.
there's no
Mhm.
accountability, there's nobody looking after them, and I mean, if I'm a family member of someone in trouble and I'm looking at that, I don't want any of my family released on simple release if they've got a 200% greater chance of being in a worse situation in 18 months.
Mhm.
No. Why would anybody want that? Why
And
would
that's
our
where you pay
system?
nothing, right? You just
Yes,
sign?
that's
Okay.
right. We say pay nothing and you just get released on your promise.
How
Why
many
would
times
anyone?
are they allowed that, like a habitual criminal?
Well, that's a
Like
good
chronic
point.
arrests?
Yeah, good question. Good question. Those, but in charge-based release systems, which is, like New York has a list of crimes, and if you're charged with something on this list, it's misdemeanors mostly now. You will
Okay.
be released on on no bond, which is a simple release, and organized crime. Career criminals and gangs, they learn very quickly that if they can commit that crime as much as they want, and they'll get the same result. So it's
Just over
charge
and
based
over?
over
Endless?
and over. Yeah, and so you get people that have been arrested many times get the same result because that's a charge based release system. It's
So
crazy.
I live in Nevada now, and we have a law here. The laws are very different here than Illinois.
Mhm.
Not for the better either. Um, they have a law called a habitual criminal.
Mhm.
Like you get a certain amount of felonies, I believe is how you get that title, but they still get paroled. It's supposed to be like 15 to 30 years for the term, but it's never that. And they're habitual criminals. So it's supposed to be life in prison. But what does that mean? Do you guys have that, a habitual criminal law?
Yeah, and sometimes they call it 3 strikes, you're out. I mean, but
Yeah.
that's what they are. I mean, those we're supposed to identify the people that are committing, um, the same crime, the crimes over and over. Because, the theory is that we have a small group committing 60 to 70% of the crime. So it's kind of like a city within the city. And
Hmm.
it's a small group of criminals within the larger city. And then I always like to say there's a gray area between the two where people are watching every day to see what is society doing. Are we holding the criminals accountable? If they are, then they're going to be on the law abiding side of the city. But if they're not, then they're letting them get away with crime. Then they're going to agree. Then your crime's going to increase because they're going to side with the criminals because nobody's being held accountable. And so
Hmm.
the theory behind the habitual criminal laws is that let's identify that 60%, 70%, and then if they will not rehabilitate, then let's hold them. The problem is jail overcrowding, and people
Yeah.
don't want to pay for people to be in jail. The public doesn't. Just like, we won't stand for crime increasing. We won't stand for paying for holding everybody in jail. So we got to have a happy medium.
Yeah. What
And
is that?
well,
What
the
would
happy
you?
medium in historically has been the private industry bailing people out of jail, ensuring that they get to court, and if they don't, holding them accountable. But during this debate on criminal justice reform, where we don't hold anyone accountable, we're using simple release, and then when they don't show up, their cases get put on hold, and
And then
then
they're just out wandering the world.
committing more crimes,
Mhm.
getting the same result, and then eventually their cases get dismissed or they commit a bad
Okay.
enough crime that now they're going to be held. So that's where we are right now. And I think we're at the end of that cycle because we've had this same cycle happen in the 60s where we felt safe, we were more forgiving on our criminal laws, and then we had crime increase, and so we had a backlash. The two parties couldn't agree on how to address it because the party that pushed for it refused to um, concede that crime was increasing. And so we had a backlash. We got Reagan, and Reagan had his war on drugs. We've had the same cycle just happen.
Oh,
And it ended with probably giving us Trump 2.0 over crime and immigration policy. Whether that's going to be sustainable is going to be a different issue because there's so much money in politics now. It's so political.
yeah.
Um,
It's scary.
it's very scary, but I think that I would say Trump 2.0 is the point where the backlash presented itself to stand up for law and order again in the national election. If we get that one more election cycle at the national level, like a president, I think you'll see both parties become law and order parties again, like they've always been. But
Yeah,
I
that
think
would
it's
be
going to need
nice.
that.
We need order. We
We
need
need
order,
Well, and that's why I'm
safety.
always hopeful because what we're doing right now is not sustainable. And when something's not sustainable,
Right.
there will be a correction.
Yeah, I think like so, in my private practice, so many my client people are scared. They're just
Yeah.
feeling this, like what I call like their central nervous system. It's unrest.
But are you seeing a lot of people that just lack basic social skills? It's like kind of like when I was graduating from college, I went on a date with somebody that was homeschooled, and they just seemed to lack basic social skills of being able
Yeah.
to interact with people. And I'm concerned that coming out of the pandemic that we have, this small generation of people that lack basic social skills, and that causes anxiety, and that causes
Yeah.
an inability to connect, or inability to launch.
I
Because,
think I agree that kids who are homeschooled, because you can't have both. You can't be homeschooled and socialized, not to the same level that you would be if you were submerged daily, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week,
well,
like
that may
going
not
to
be a bad
soccer
thing, but it
class
can be a
once a
bad thing for
day.
some people.
Yeah, so I think, yes, socially, but I mean, the people I work with generally aren't homeschooled people. I do have some clients who are Hispanic or have Hispanic partners, they're the ones that are feeling the actual fear. And then I feel like there are other people who aren't Hispanic that are feeling, so there's just so much hatred is what I see as a clinician, so much hatred and anger and fear on both sides. And it's become a therapy topic now. The fear of, because I'm in Nevada, so California's right here.
What's the number one fear?
So the things that are being said is even white people are getting arrested. ICE
So fear of
agents are
crime.
taking everyone, even if you're white.
Uh,
And if you're even if you have brown skin, it doesn't matter if you have papers or no papers, everybody's getting taken. And then I do, know of some people who are here illegally. And then they're afraid that everybody's disappearing into the abyss once the ICE agents take them. So that they'll be beat, killed, and disappear, or be tortured, disappear. So
or just
there's
be
so,
deported.
and some, yes, but some are white people who are here, but there's so much fear. And then on the flip side of that is, people wanting like law and order, and so there's a lot going on right now, and I think the lack of like
Well, the
people.
debate on this issue is just awful because it's very intertwined with the criminal justice issue. Because we have large numbers of illegal aliens who have committed violent offenses.
Yeah.
That's a bad issue. And when did it become okay in our country to defend criminal illegal aliens? That's okay. It's like it's
Or
okay for
any
them to be
criminals.
here.
Any
Well, yeah,
criminals, why would we defend any
yeah,
rapists? Why are we defending a
yeah,
rapist? I don't care where you're from, Mars,
yeah.
Mexico, Ireland. I don't care where you're from. You're committing a crime. But then I think speaking, I hate to get into politics, but just speaking as a human, I'm not a political person. If somebody commits a rape or a murder and they're not a citizen of this country, why would the US tax dollars from the citizens pay to house this inmate? That doesn't make sense, right?
Well, sometimes, the criminal justice system wants the punishment and then deportation after the punishment because they want
Oh, after.
sometimes, and then a lot of times they get arrested and they get deported. That's
Oh,
a major issue right now.
I realized that the government wanted them to,
It
the government
depends on
wants
how
us
bad the
to
crime
pay.
is, but if there's a really violent offense, they would. They're not just going to take them to trial, find them guilty, and then deport them. If it's a
Oh,
high profile murder, they're going to want them to be in to serve their time. I think it depends on the situation.
what about, so this, I don't know if this is not the best question. So let's say somebody was here illegally from anywhere, from Iran, and they got arrested. Do they run a system to find out if they're here legally first?
Well, so if they are here illegally and they're in the system, so like the number one way somebody comes in is, they come in, they're encountered, and so they're taken in. They ask for asylum, and so they get into the system. They get a hearing,
Okay.
and people criticize that they haven't received their due process, but they have. That's what the proceeding is, and if they don't go to the hearing, or if they do go to the hearing, well, then the judge issues a order, and a lot of times it's you're not entitled to asylum, and so here's your
Okay.
deportation order, and so that's what's going to pull up if they're stopped, and
Okay.
there will be an order that pulls up on their name that says they have been ordered to be deported. They've been ordered to leave the country, and then someone. I think what's kind of surprising to some people is that some people historically, like if you have a green card, that would be considered you're here legally. But if you are accused of a crime, depending on the crime, they can revoke your green card because of
Oh,
the allegation of the crime.
okay.
And
So
so
now,
you're seeing that.
as far as your specialty. So let's say that person from Iran got arrested,
Mm-hmm.
and because it's Texas, where you're saying like your state, everybody pretty much is eligible for bail unless it's one of the capital
Mm-hmm.
crimes. So let's say they committed like a petty crime, like a petty theft. They get arrested, they find out they're here illegally. Would they be eligible for bail?
Yes, they're eligible for bail, but here's the problem. So without the bail, they would be held in jail because the county has a warrant for their arrest and they've exercised
Oh,
it and so served it, and so they're in the county jail. Once the bond is posted, that's what authorizes their release. And once they're released, they'll then be turned over to any other agency that has a hold on them. So you can imagine, so they post a $10,000, or we post a $10,000 bond for them.
mm-hmm.
They, instead of being released, are turned over to ICE, and then ICE deports them. They come up for a hearing, fail to appear, they're
Oh,
not coming back,
oh
and
my
the bonding
goodness.
company has to pay the whole $10,000 to the county. So
Oh, no.
that's a big issue right now. Is
So how do you reconcile that? What do you do?
Well, first thing, we want to make sure that someone here is here legally before we post a bond. If we post a bond and they get turned over to ICE, then we're going to try to get them to return to the county. We're going to go ask for a warrant to return them to the county because, we only got a premium on the bond. We don't want to pay the 100%. We don't want people to be removed from the country and then us have to
Right.
pay 100%. So sometimes it's a race. It's a terrible situation with the change of immigration law.
Yeah. Because so what can you, I mean, and then if that person who got arrested knows they're getting deported, what's their motivation to even pay the bail or
Well,
show
if
up
it's a
to court?
really bad crime, you think of it, this could be an avenue of escape. I mean, it's a bad
Mm,
crime. They're going to go to jail for
yeah.
20 years. So they post the bond, they get turned over to ICE, and they get deported. Well, now they're out of the country. They're not going to face the crime.
And then
Uh,
they don't get charged that charge.
that
That's
charge, well, the charge is going to continue to sit for a long time sometimes because DAs have told me that they think that is an extra incentive for that defendant not to come back to the United States.
But what about in Mexico or Iran or
They're not
wherever?
going to be prosecuted for a crime they committed in the United States there.
So they're just free. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about that. Well, okay, what about this scenario? They come here illegally. They're not, no visa, no
Mm-hmm.
immunity, nothing. They just get here however they get here. No papers on them, nothing. They didn't overstay, they just got here. And then they commit a crime. Would they be eligible for bail?
Yes. Same result, same situation. In Texas, if they're here illegally, then that would be generally, most counties, that would be reported to ICE. ICE would determine whether they want to put a hold on them. Most places, if they are, they would. And so the same situation, same result.
So is before this administration and what's going on right now, and I know like people being here illegally has been since I don't know when, forever. I don't know when it started, but has it always been standard practice when someone is arrested to figure out if they're here legally? Is that it?
Not on the scale it is right now, but we've always had situations where someone would be turned over to ICE once they were released. And so we're always checking for immigration status when we're posting a bond.
Oh, that's
And
normal before this.
that has always been a part. I think it's a much bigger part now.
Yeah.
And so I think it is, but I think before this administration, I don't think we saw many situations where green cards, because if you had a green card, we'd say you're here legally. We can post your bond without fear of you being deported. That's not true
Okay.
anymore. That's not true anymore.
That's scary for your field too, then financially. I mean, have you had like significant loss of money because of that?
Yes. Yes. I mean, the legislature proposed a constitutional amendment that did not get passed by the legislature that says if you're here illegally, you're not entitled to bail. That would have solved that issue.
Yeah.
But it didn't pass. We could solve, I mean, there are things we can do to minimize it. And in some counties recognize there's a problem, so they're willing to settle for less than 100% of the bond because of the situation. But
You
it's a
think
problem.
that's purposeful so that if the bail, but what are they called? Bail bondsman?
Yes,
If
ma'am.
the bail bondsman knows that somebody is potentially here illegally, they're not going to put the bail up.
I would say today, especially, probably 80 to 90% of the bondsmen would not touch that bond.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame them. They're not getting it back.
That's right. That's right. You cannot blame
So
them
it's
at
so
all.
interesting. Interesting.
Well, you set an immigration policy, and really, I mean, we're talking about two administrations, but the same set of laws. We're just one
Mhm.
administration refused to enforce, and the
Yeah,
other administration is enforcing it. Uh, so you can see where a decision about enforcement is having a huge impact, and
yeah.
the unintended consequences are enormous.
Yeah, and you don't think, I mean, I don't know I wouldn't think,
Mhm.
that that would affect you and the bail bondsman and just the domino of everything
Yes.
is pretty
Well,
profound.
and our position is we just want to notify the sheriff, and if they want the defendant, then bring him back. But if they don't want him, then don't go after the industry for the bond amount. I mean, if
Yeah,
y'all are going to allow him to be deported, then just dismiss the case and be done and dismiss the bond forfeiture. But it
yeah,
seems like you're trying to turn immigration policy into a moneymaker for the county, and bail was never intended to be a moneymaker for the
yeah.
county.
Everything's a moneymaker, the prisons, the wait till if they do the talk of reopening what using the old fashioned word asylums.
Yeah.
There's talk of that coming back. I don't love that word because of the history
But
of what's going
I
on,
mean,
but I
Trump
think
is,
it's necessary. We need long-term facilities that are safe for people with chronic mental illness.
but the president has even said he would agree with that. It's just the funding. There's no
Oh,
funding source for that, and there's no constituency to argue for it. So it has the
that's for
exact same problem it had 40 years ago.
yeah, there is funding. We can make funding because that's crazy. This is,
How
like you
can we
said,
make
this is
funding? I
the
mean, it's
result.
the facilities are more expensive than the jails to run
How?
because the number of beds are a lot smaller, and
Um,
and
yeah,
the
they don't have
personnel to
everybody
run
staffed.
it. I mean, so you're talking about each facility holds a lot fewer people than the jail or the prison, and the staff that have to be there to run it because it's a mental health facility is a lot more expensive. And so running a mental health facility is a lot more expensive than running a jail on a per
Mhm.
capita basis.
Yeah, it needs to get figured out because they're just it's being done. Yeah, everybody's in
Yeah,
jail and
absolutely.
it's just a mess.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so interesting. I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I'm going to ask you a weird oddball question, but
Yeah.
what's the difference between a narcissist and a psychopath?
Okay, so they're both personality disorders.
Mhm.
So you do know what that is?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's like a classification of the type of mental illness. So psychopath, you said a psychopath?
Yes, ma'am.
So psychopath, in our book, which if I move it, it will drop my whole container, my whole setup down. Our DSM book, psychopath isn't an actual DSM diagnosis. The actual diagnosis for that the equivalent would be called an antisocial personality disorder.
Okay.
So they have more of like, they're the ones committing the pretty brutal crimes or chronic
So
criminals.
is one antisocial, the other immature social?
So when they use the word, I wish they would change the term antisocial personality because it makes people think that they're not social. What it really, I think the best way I can explain it is it's anti-society. So
Okay.
they are not following the cultural norms, the laws, society's expectations. So, when they're little, they're harming animals, they're setting fires, they're skipping school. These signs are already there, and then the stealing starts, the lying starts. That's as a kid. And then that That's called like conduct disorder. Then they grow into the antisocial personality. So they're anti-society. They are not conforming to society. Then they do things, and they have no conscience. So they can, kill an animal and go eat a hamburger. They don't care. They could care less. Now, a narcissist, they have also, so personality disorder is something that's very hard to treat because your personality, think of it like fabric that's woven. And as you're developing from 0 to 18 or 0 to 8, even, this is when all the pathways are connecting in your brain. Your personality is forming. That's the fabric of your being. There's no medicine to change the fabric of your being. There is medicine to change a chemical disorder, if the chemicals are not flowing properly. So that's why personality disorders are so detrimental, because they can be. I don't want people who have borderline personality, that's different. They're not criminals.
Sure. Yeah,
They're very hard to treat, but a
hard to treat
narcissist,
because it's the one of the reasons why they're created is a very insecure self-defense mechanism to something that's happened in the
fragile
past.
ego.
Very fragile.
Very
And
fragile ego coming off with the feathers. A narcissist, they are more, the way that I view a narcissist, they are more, I would say, like mean spirited. These are more of the people that are like vengeful. They're climbing, they're stepping on throats to get wherever they want to go. And
well,
if
then
that
you've got
means,
the professional victim who is, kind of like, always the victim, and but there also has the same problems, but it's just much more veiled.
yeah, that's not a narcissist. The
A
narcissist,
covert isn't a narcissist.
a covert narcissist is, you're saying that someone who's always the victim
Or
is a
claims they are.
narcissist?
Claims, isn't that what a covert
Uh-huh.
narcissist is? A professional victim?
I guess I've never thought of it in those terms as being a professional victim. I think that they would use it as a manipulative tool
Yeah.
they're always getting what they want.
Oh,
A
yes.
narcissist has a plan.
Yeah.
And it might be to become CEO of a company, and it might be to move into the lady's house because they're homeless and they just got out of prison. And it might be that they want your pills that are in your cabinet. They always have a motive going on.
Well, again, and I'm out in left field now, and I'm taking us way off track. But the point I want to make is, when we get to just trying to decide about people, we have all of these other issues
Oh yeah.
that,
So
again,
complicated.
when we come back to talking about what we've talked about today, it is an explanation of how they're acting, but it's not an excuse.
Yeah. Bottom line, that's what people like. We can, and I, work in psychology, and I appreciate the psychology of understanding the why. That is a complete separate issue of the bottom line. These are two different things. Yes, we understand why. Does that excuse it? No, but it does change where you're going. Are you going to a prison? Or are you going to a mental health prison, a forensic prison? Like Andrea Yates, you know her? You know
Yes,
who that
ma'am.
is? Yeah. Oh, isn't she from Texas?
I believe so.
Oh, that's right. I don't know how yeah. I mean, she had postpartum psychosis.
Yeah.
And she killed all of her kids, and she is in a civil commitment center probably for the rest of her life. So yes, we understand why, but she still did it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and we hope that it's so rare when that happens, because, I don't think as a society we're really equipped with, okay, a mother killing all of her children, and there's a mental thing that explains that. And because when we see children that die
yeah,
drowning in their bathtub,
yeah,
and we want to stand up for those children, and standing up for them is not, we want to hold somebody accountable for those deaths. And so sometimes I think society is not equipped to say a mental health condition negates that. And so it applies very rarely. I
Hmm.
think we use it very rarely, and
Yeah.
honestly, it probably could be used more than it is, but I think society has a hard time with that, and I think they're hard time understanding that.
Yeah. I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah. And that's a tough thing. A civil commitment, it seems to be like a indefinite civil commitment seems to be very hard as it relates to like your constitutional rights.
Well, but
So,
also it's like, it's expensive. I mean,
yeah,
more
that's,
expensive than putting them in jail for the rest of their life, and so,
yeah.
because they need treatment, and they need, and then the problem is, okay, so what happens, so postpartum depression, that kinda tells me that she could be rehabilitated.
I
Um,
mean, and that's the goal in a civil commitment in a forensic setting, in a forensic hospital. The goal is to rehabilitate.
so but
The
she
likelihood is very low, though. I think the percentage of
well,
people who are rehabilitated is very low.
with postpartum,
Mhm.
depression, because I mean, this crime happened in 2001, so she's been in, she's that was 25 years ago, uh,
Yeah,
this
wow.
this June. Um, wow. I mean, she's 61 years old today.
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh,
just
that's crazy.
61 years old now. I mean,
Um,
look at the guy that tried to kill Reagan. He was eventually rehabilitated. Look
oh,
at
really? See, that's very rare because they get evaluated, and each state has whatever they set up for how frequently a patient, because now they're a patient, they're not an
Mhm,
inmate, for how frequently they are reevaluated. And I think it's once a year.
mhm.
They're constantly being assessed, like every, I think, quarter. And then once a year, they have a full reevaluation, at least the states I know of. I don't know if that's everywhere. That's very, very expensive. And
Yeah.
then their likelihood that they're ever going to sign off and say she is good to go, and that's on their license, their, I don't know the right word, like they're saying, yeah, she's good to go. So she goes out, or anyone who's civilly committed, they're not guilty by reason of insanity people, then who's liable if all these doctors sign off, yes, he's good to go, and then he goes out and kills a bunch of people, the hospital, I am assuming, would be liable, right?
Wow. I mean, that's really sad. I mean, that's sad from the standpoint of we don't, I mean, there's systemic issues that are
Mhm.
working against people. I mean, and I don't, I mean, the only other postpartum depression I've ever remember hearing about that was severe is I remember Marie Osmond when she was having kids,
Oh,
that she had severe postpartum depression.
I didn't know
Um,
that. Well, Andrea Yates had postpartum psychosis, which is
okay.
different. Yeah, psychosis, so it's like schizophrenia.
Okay.
You're hearing voices, you're seeing,
Okay.
and
That
she
makes
had
sense.
delusions. Yeah. So postpartum depression is can be very horrible, but you're not hearing voices and hallucinations and paranoia. So I hope, I didn't know Marie Osmond had it, but I hope she didn't have psychosis. And some people do
No,
have
she did not. I mean,
postpartum
I just
psychosis.
and you know what? I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I mean, that just tells you how long ago it was, and it tells you
Yeah.
how old I am. And I think she's talked about how she had severe depression after having
Yeah.
each of her kids.
It's brutal, yeah, and everyone who gets psychosis isn't killing their kids either, so I just wanna make
Mhm.
sure I put that out. I mean, that
Well,
was
and
an
that's a good point.
ridiculous.
One of the things that we, you know, need to say, and I'm a religious person, and the fact that, one person is Andrea Yates and the next person is Marie Osmond doesn't have those issues, and then the next person has a normal pregnancy. I mean,
Mhm.
I look at that and I go, there's no rhyme or reason. There's no explanation for the difference between each of these people. It's just by the grace of God,
Yeah,
you and I weren't didn't have that result.
I
And
know.
there's no explanation. I mean, I tell people, God gave us free will, and with free will comes consequences.
Mhm.
And some of these consequences are terrible, but that's the
Yeah.
price of having free will.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I agree with you. it's tricky. Humans are very complex, and it's hard to have this like system in place where it's like a one size fits all. I don't think that's possible, and we're in like a disaster zone right now.
We are.
But I hope, they situate the laws in your state to help protect you from not losing all that you're investing in this in your business. I mean,
Well, I
who
appreciate that.
hires you though? I'm just curious. Just last question. Like, who hires you? Do inmates? Wait,
No,
who? No, the bail bondsman hires
the
you.
bondsmen hire me. The insurance companies hire me. I've had a bail bond, an administrative agency hire me, although I normally don't work for the administrative agencies.
Okay,
I normally work for the people that appear before them. But yeah,
very
surety
interesting.
across the state.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been so fun talking to you. I love like talking shop. It's interesting and hearing, our fields touch in certain ways we connect, and then some things like I had no idea. So I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and experience.
Well, I appreciate you having me. It's been great. I would love to have conversations with smart people, and
Yeah,
you're a
thank
wealth of you're a great resource on the mental health issues.
Yeah, if you ever need it to run by anything by me, I might not know it, but I'll do my best. And you contact me anytime. Feel free.
Thank
And I'm
you.
going to check out your podcast. What's it called again?
The Bell Post. You can go to pbtx.com, which is our website. We have a blog. But we also have links to our podcast, or you can
Okay.
go to thebellpost.com and you just go there directly.
BAIL.
Yes, and we're
Okay.
starting season 5 this year.
Oh, awesome.
We've been ranked. Depends on the time of year, but we're ranked in the top 10 of criminal justice podcast
That's
many times.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I'll put a link in the description of this one to your
Okay.
podcast. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, sir. Go have a great weekend, and thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you.
Okay. I'll
Bye.
talk to you another time.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.